So welcome everybody to our 8th episode of our Bay Area housing market Q&A today. And today our topic is about planning, construction, and ADU. I'm very excited to be co-hosting with our very beloved Steve Edrington. He actually was on our call a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the rental housing at the time. And it was a very engaging conversation, and he's definitely very knowledgeable. So to give you a little background of Steve Edrington, he's a certified property manager, certified commercial investment member, CCIM, and as a matter of fact, I am currently serving as the president for our Northern California chapter, and Steve Edrington, he was one of our past presidents as well. And he's also a residential building code inspector, has over 25 years experience as a broker, investor, and developer. He has done so much. So Steve, would you like to do a little bit intro about yourself?
Oh, thanks, Helen. Thanks for having us. Yes, I'm past president of the CCIM chapter, which Helen is doing a great job now as president. Yeah, I've been a broker, a real estate investor, and we do a lot of consulting work. So yeah, we're looking forward to talking about ADUs today, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. So now, as usual, we always begin with a little bit of an intro about our group. This is, again, our 8th episode of our Bay Area Housing Market Town Hall. We started on the second week of the shelter in place. The main reason is to bridge that information gap between the consumers and also our local real estate industry so that we can empower not just us, the real estate professional, but also our consumers to understand what they should do right now, right? So to start off with, I shared this yesterday at another meeting with our CCIM member. The main reason is that obviously right now we are going through a lot of crazy times. We are going through this pandemic with coronavirus. We have this huge protest for the injustice of a certain minority group. And you know, I just feel so proud because we are Americans, and even not just Americans, just human beings. We are all standing up for each other for the injustice that we have. And so when I watched this documentary a few days ago on ESPN, they were interviewing Bruce Lee, and the title is called Be Water. And Bruce Lee is such a big philosopher, and I love the fact that him and I'm trying to relate to him. It's like we both came from Hong Kong, moved here from Hong Kong. I moved here at 18 years old. He also moved here at 18 years old. And when he was trying to break into Hollywood, the interviewer asked him, he's like, hey, do you see yourself as a Chinese or North American? And he was like, I want to think of myself as a human being because under the sky, we're but one family. It just so happens that we look different. And that is absolutely how I live by it. I came here, obviously we see ourselves different, but I do think that we're all one big family here. And as leaders in real estate industry, I think there are changes that can be made, and a lot of changes in our world is made by small leaders. And we start by ripple, and then hopefully in the future we can create a wave. So I think we all need to model our way to show that, you know, we are one big family. And then the whole goal, again, for us is to elevate the real estate industry standards so that we can help our clients to be better consumers, like to help with their real estate investments. So with that said, again, I want to show you guys some of the news that we've seen recently. Last Friday, Wall Street Journal had stated that the jobless rate fell to 13.3% and employers added 2.5 million jobs, blowing all Wall Street expectations out of the water. And then because of this great news, mortgage rates supposedly spiked on shocking jobs report. So obviously everybody started worrying like what happened to mortgage rates. So this morning I had asked a loan officer that I work with, Victor Chow from Wells Fargo. He had sent me these rates. 30 years fixed conforming rate is at 3%. And then 30 years fixed jumbo at 3.25. Yes, it had gone up a little bit, but my gosh, 3.25 I think is not bad for a jumbo loan. And today, it just came out. Federal Reserve had talked about they're going to keep the benchmark interest rate near zero through 2022. This is a historical low interest rate. which if you have a good credit, definitely need to take advantage of it. And it's great that it's gonna go through 2022, but because of that, I'm sure that it's gonna improve housing, help with the housing. And as you see that Robert Dietz is a chief economist for the National Association of Home Builders, had said that the data lend evidence to the NAHB forecast that housing will be a leading sector in eventual economic recovery. So housing is really a lot of times is the one that lead us out of the economic recovery. So now the question is, how is our housing market right now? I've shown this chart for the past few weeks, and just kind of still seeing that, you see, as soon as our showings resume, which was May 4th, the pendings 2020 has increased quite drastically. And what's crazy is that I noticed by this time, you see that it's matching last year 2019 numbers really closely. So we're really not far behind. And another was like from Santa Clara County Association Realtors that has shown that compared to 1 year ago, let's focus on single family residents for a little bit. This is Santa Clara County numbers. There are, of course, less closed sales, right? Because of the shelter in place. Compared to a year ago, we had 50% less in terms of number of closed sale. However, if you look at the median price compared to a year ago, it still went up 2%. Compared to a month ago, it did go down 1.8%. And the average days on the market, I thought this is really interesting. Right now it's 23 days on the market. Average days 1 year ago was 24. Average days 1 month ago was 18. It actually stays on the market even shorter, because the only reason that you can explain is that there's still demand and then not enough supply. And then here are two charts regarding like how are people making offers. You see that last year in June, of course, they were about 103% over asking price. And then typically, summertime and then towards the end, it's like slowing down. And then before the shelter in place started, the market jumped. Last year, a lot of people have been talking about, we're gonna wait until 2020 because the market is gonna crash. But then we started off 2020 really strong, and the competition was really fierce. And so you saw that people were offering really aggressively. And then shelter in place started. This is like around April time, but then again, the closing in April, that means they made an offer in March, right? So you still see pretty strong numbers. But after shelter in place started, now we tapered back off to about 101%, so about 1% over. So people are a little bit more conservative when they make an offer. And then now this chart goes back to looking at, what about the price? A lot of people thought that, well, because of the shelter in place, I bet the price had gone down quite a bit. But this is based on 3 counties numbers. This is Alameda, San Mateo, and Santa Clara County. And if you look at the numbers, the numbers stayed pretty consistent. And then we are still going back to June 2019, and then June 2020 is about $1.1 million versus 1.08. So it's slightly increased, but it stays pretty the same, and then you don't see a huge drop on the pricing. And lastly, this is a chart I want to touch on a little bit on the commercial real estate side. Delinquency rate, again, we talked about, because of this shelter in place, I think commercial real estate will get a big hit. But we've been, a lot of people have been saying that industrial is going to be very strong. So you see that their delinquency rate is pretty good. It's only 1.82 compared to, it's the lowest compared to other commercial real estate asset types. And then the second is the office. And I think one of the sectors that a lot of people are very surprised about is multifamily, because we hear news talking about all the renters, about 30% of renters are not going to be paying rent. We're going to have a lot of property owners probably going to have to go into foreclosure because they're not able to pay for their mortgage payments. But the delinquency rate is only about 3.25%. Actually, relatively speaking, it's not that bad, but it did go up quite a bit from April's numbers. And then, of course, the lodging, which is the hotels and retail, they are getting a big hit. So we will see that there are going to be quite a bit of possibly some foreclosures that happen in the lodging hotel side and also the retail properties. And yesterday, the news biz journals, I came up with this article talking about that they have this proposed California law, SB 1285. Not sure if, Steve, you have heard about that, but they're talking about this could make it easier to pivot to housing on these struggling office and retail properties. So we're going to see what will happen on that front. But definitely on the commercial real estate side that we've been talking about, like there are going to be a lot of probably rezoning or repurposing of these properties to for other purposes. So that is it in terms of for my state of the market report. And I'm going to turn it to Steve Edrington for you to introduce our speakers for today.
All right, thanks, Helen.
Sure.
And the thing on Bruce Lee, he had a studio in Oakland, so we feel very connected.
And I just talked to somebody, actually Ryan, yesterday, that he told me there is a real estate agent in the Peninsula area. He does these Bruce Lee Kung Fu school. So I was like, wow, I didn't know. I'm really intrigued now. I've been watching a lot of Bruce Lee stuff and Jackie Chan stuff these days. So maybe one day when my back is better, I will start doing it.
All right, cool. All right, let's, okay.
All right. Would you like to share your screen first, or would you like to?
Yes, I think you have to give me, you have to give me permission here to share the screen.
Sure, let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen for now. Okay. Oops. Oh, where did my thing go? Sorry. Stop sharing. There we go.
Okay, great. Let me share my screen here. It says host disabled sharing, so you need to enable me.
Okay. There we go.
Okay. Okay. Hope everybody can see me.
And just some housekeeping items. If anyone wants to ask questions, feel free to type it into the Q&A box. And then if you have anything you want to chat with us directly, definitely feel free to put it on chat. And Dimitri, I will definitely show you, I'll share with you the data source if you can send me an email, and I can share that with you.
All right, thanks, Helen. Hi, welcome, and thanks for having me. Today we're going to talk about adding and legalizing accessory dwelling units. I'm Steve Edrington. I'm a CCIM and also a certified property manager. So today, what's in it for you? Our goal today is increase your knowledge about accessory dwelling units, understand new laws regarding accessory dwelling units, learn how to potentially add value, and learn past the legalization. We do a lot of that, and then we'll talk about the risk and rewards. Just a real disclaimer, not a lawyer, not giving you legal advice. We always recommend you hire a competent lawyer, not your friend's divorce lawyer. They may be great at that, but if you get into landlord-tenant issues, hire a competent landlord-tenant lawyer. All right, a little bit about me. Been a real estate broker for 25 years. Used to be a lobbyist for the industry. I'm an owner and manager of property. We construct and consult on ADUs. We've constructed it, and we do currently consulting on ADUs. We do expert witness in the landlord-tenant area, and I help draft Oakland's just cause for eviction regulations. So we'll talk a little about that. I'm a CCIM, I'm a building inspector, and we're also MCLE provider for continuing education. Well, if you're an attorney on the call and you'd like to get 1 hour continuing education, at the end, hang on and we'll give you some information on how to get credit. I also want to introduce Phil Barthman. He's our senior building inspector, and he used to work for the County of Alameda for 20 years as a senior building inspector. He's also an electrician by trade, and he's been helping us with our ADU reports. So we'll repeat this throughout. The law that we're talking about is a zoning law, and then you have to meet the building inspection or the building law. So Phil, you want to say a couple words?
Just glad to be here and looking forward to answering your questions.
Great, thanks for joining the call. All right, so our agenda today is introduction to ADUs, talk about new state laws, because this is a new state law. It's a zoning override of the local jurisdiction. We'll have a couple local jurisdiction updates. We won't spend a lot of time here. We'll talk about legalizing existing units, adding units, and then we'll take your questions and answers. All right, let's talk definitions here. What is an ADU? It's an accessory dwelling unit, also known as in-law units, granny flats. We've heard a lot of different names, but generally they're a secondary home attached to a primary house, and they usually have their own kitchen and bath, sleeping area, and they have a separate entrance. So when we think of ADU, they come in all shapes, sizes, and forms, but they're always accessory to the primary unit. Okay, it's gonna always share a lot, maybe attached, it may be detached, maybe within the shell, it could be standalone. It can have its own energy connections, but with the new ADU law, we'll talk about it. It can share the electrical connections with the primary dwelling unit. It may be rented separately, but no condo conversions and no short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, can't do that with ADUs. It's strictly prohibited in the law. All right, so why accessory dwelling units? Why is it the rage? Why should we think about it? It helps address our housing shortages. People don't realize 50% of the housing shortages in the United States are within California. And it's estimated that we have 3 to 4 million we're short 3 to 4 million housing units, rental housing units in California. So we have a huge demand supply gap. It gives property owners potentially more income, and it helps add units while maintaining the neighborhood look and feel. Here's a problem in California. There's been Scott Weiner, state senator from San Francisco, has introduced a couple bills to increase density. Those are always seem to be very contentious and have lots of opposition, but the ADU law had a lot of cross-board support, and it's generally very palatable to most politicians. That's why we're seeing more ADU laws. All right, a couple options. You can convert the existing basement, you can build a new structure, or you can convert your garage. The law allows, if you have a single family home, you can have 2 ADUs. One, you can convert an existing space, and one, you can add a new unit. So technically, you can take any single family home in California and turn it into a virtual duplex, a triplex. So we'll talk a little more about junior ADUs, what they are. It's kind of a new concept in the ADU world. All right, here's a couple examples of how you can do it. You can attach it to the existing structure.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Do you have slides? Because we're not seeing any slides right now.
Not seeing any slides? I am sorry. I'm glad you said something because I've been going through my slides here. How about now? Can you see it? Can you see my slides now?
We can see some orange background.
Let me relaunch it. How about now?
There you go. Yes.
All right, great. Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, so options for creating ADUs. You can add an existing basement. You can create a new structure, attached or detached. And like I said, you can do, basically with a single family home, you can add 2 ADUs. You can build a new structure and you can convert an existing structure. Okay, here are some options for ADUs. This is using a single family home example. You can attach it. You can make it separate. You can add the basement and convert the basement. You can convert the garage in the back. So there's a lot of options that you can do with ADUs. All right, so the difference between a junior ADU and a regular ADU is 500 square feet, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, single family homes, you had 3 bills that passed in the State House, and they basically merged into the new zoning code. So like I said, if you have an ADU, you can add a 2 ADUs to an existing house. So let's talk about junior ADUs. So what is a junior ADU? A junior ADU is less than 500 square feet. Here's the kind of the weird thing. You can share a bathing facility with a primary residence. So you could have a sleeping room with a kitchen, but yet the person could come upstairs and use the bath in the primary house. So that's really the difference in size and also bathing facility. The second item here on our screen is huge. This is where we deal with most of our clients. If you have a multifamily building, you can add ADUs. This is new. This is very new. It's only came out this year. The past ADU laws did not allow for this. So if within a structure, it's 25%. And so if you have an 8-unit building, you can have 2 units. So we're seeing a lot of clients converting basements, adding units in the back. And this is a huge thing. And we have, in the city I'm in Oakland, we feel that we have somewhere around 10 to 20,000 illegal units. And this is a path that landlords can use to finally legalize illegal units out there.
Wow, so does it mean that initially it's 8-unit structure, they add 2 more units, now they can legally call it, this is a 10-unit building?
It's an 8-unit building with 2 accessory dwelling units.
Okay, so it's not like technically not 10-unit, but you can call it 8-unit plus 2 additional.
That's right. And we'll talk about new construction. So if I'm building an 8-unit building, brand new, I can add 2 units as an ADU. So where the zoning allows for 8 units, I can now add 10. So this is huge. Phil, you do a lot of multifamily inspections. Can you clue in some of the issues that you're seeing here?
So when you're doing multi buildings, primarily what we're looking at is converting unused space. So in some cases, they'll have unused offices or basement spaces that they're converting. So basically what we're doing is we're just recycling space that's already in a building that is not being utilized for profit.
What sort of problems are you finding, Phil?
Ceiling height is one of the big issues. And now in Oakland, you can get away with a 7-foot ceiling height on some of these. However, on some of them you can't. And so 7.5-foot ceilings are a real key to getting these in. Other things that we're seeing is dealing with parking issues. Many times a landlord would like to convert parking spaces that they've got on their property, carports, covered parking, that sort of thing. And that's very doable. But again, it goes back to the legal connection and their legal lawyer talking to them about compensating tenants for losing parking to deal with this.
Right. So if you're in a city with rent and eviction control, if you take away a parking spot, it could be deemed potentially wrongful eviction. And so we recommend, if you're going to take away a housing service from a tenant, that you consult your legal counsel and discuss that. This is in kind of an interesting area, legal area, and we highly recommend that. So Phil, I know that. And then tell about electrical. I know you deal with a lot of electrical issues on these buildings.
Well, you know, when you get into a city like Oakland or San Francisco, where you've got houses that are literally built in the 1800s and wired in the early 1900s by my grandfather, many times people are not exactly on board with the understanding that, hey, you're going to need to upgrade the electrical in these buildings, just if for no other reason than the electrical service size to handle the load of the new added units. And so, you know, electrical work can be expensive, and it is unfortunately one of those really necessary things that needs to happen many times with these types of installations.
Okay, great. So one of the things that the state law has said, that the cities can't say that you automatically get 16 feet on the height for the ADU. The city of Oakland or the city of San Jose can't say, no, 12. They must allow at least 16 feet on the height. Now they can do higher. Some cities are doing like 35 feet. That's fine. The other thing that the city is saying is, this is for new construction. For setback, they can't require you to have a 5 or a 10-foot setback. If you want to build an ADU, the city must allow you to go up to 4 feet from the property line. And Phil, maybe you can explain this a little bit more from a fire king.
Yeah, so many times, especially when you're dealing with side and rear property lines, cities have got real strict rules about that they want to keep buildings away from those property lines. By keeping buildings away from the property lines, it enhances the fire safeness. By stacking buildings close together, what that involves typically is firewalls and non-conforming, or I'm sorry, non-combustible construction. And that can get a little bit spendy. So what this is allowing is it's allowing you to build much closer to your property lines, which allows you to get a bigger building or more buildings onto the property so that you can get more rent.
Okay, so I know when we start looking at, because a lot of people called us, Phil, about converting their garage that's sitting on the lot line. You know, so they have a one car garage at 10 by 20, it's sitting right on the property line. So this is kind of where, so the law says from a zoning standpoint, it's okay, but then the building code kicks in, and then talk about that, Phil.
Well, this law allows you to convert a permitted structure. So if you've got something that you just patched together, that's probably not going to work. But if you've got an existing grandfathered in, which means it was permitted at some point in time, garage on a zero lot line, you are allowed to convert that. Now, things that may need to happen, you may need to upgrade that wall that's on the property line. And that's typically a very common call for a building department to make. And more often than not, it's just a matter of cutting back eaves and using some sort of non-combustible exterior coating, such as stucco over some sheetrock or something along those lines. And again, that's something that the architect will specify when your plans are drawn. They're going to talk about what specifically you're going to need to make that wall meet the minimum hourly requirement there on the property line.
And then what about windows on that property line if you're sitting
Yeah,
right?
that's not going to happen. That's a non-starter. If you've got a zero lot line, yeah, you're not going to have any openings there at all for the most part.
Okay, great. So one of the things with the new state law is you get 1,200 square feet ADU, period. And then it says local jurisdictions, you can regulate this area. So if you walk in to the city of San Jose and you say, hey, I want to put a 1-bedroom ADU, they're going to have to allow for 850 square feet. So they can't say, oh, you can only have a 500 square foot. No, you get 850 square feet if the local jurisdiction has an ordinance. If the city, like Oakland doesn't have an ordinance right now. So if you walk into the city of Oakland, you get 1,200 square feet. Now, if you have a 2-bedroom or bigger, the city local jurisdiction can regulate that you can only have 1,000 square feet. So the state says, hey, you get this overlay, but jurisdictions you get to regulate in this area. So if your local jurisdiction, and you check, doesn't have an ADU ordinance, you can follow state law. If your local jurisdiction has a companion ADU ordinance, the local jurisdiction can restrict it down to 1,000 feet for a 2-bedroom and down to 850 square feet for a 1-bedroom. If you have to demolish parking, it's okay. So that's always been an issue. Hey, I can't add this unit because the zoning says I have to have 1-to-1 parking. You can demolish parking and that is okay. Owner occupancy. So cities like Berkeley had owner occupancy that, hey, if you built an ADU, you had to live in the primary dwelling. State law says local jurisdictions can't require owner occupancy. So you can have a house and put an ADU out, and you can rent out the house and the ADU. It's fine until 2025. The other thing that the state law told local jurisdictions, if you have an ADU that's 750 square feet or less, you can't charge impact fees. So I'll use City of Oakland. They have a $28,000 impact fee. San Francisco, I think, is like 50 or 60,000 for an impact fee. So if that ADU is 750 or less, they can't charge you an impact fee. If it's over that, they have to charge you. Let's say that you do one for 850 square feet. They can charge you for that $100 per square foot of that impact fee. It's a pro rata share. So that's huge because, you know, if you go to add a regular unit or legalize regular units, man, all these impact fees. We're looking with one client going through an ADU process for a regular unit is about a $50,000 difference because of all the fees and things they have to do.
And right now there are so many cities that are encouraging ADUs, and they are actually lowering this, the fees to build an ADU as well, right?
Well, the state says you have to, so that's why they're doing it.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the issue. So in the past, a local jurisdiction say, hey, your building is zoned for 5 units. You have an 8-unit building there now. It's legal non-conforming. And they would say, no, you couldn't add a secondary unit. If you're 8 units and it's zoned for 5, you still get an ADU. So they can't say, oh, it's non-conforming, so the answer is no. So if you have an 8-unit building and if you look at the zoning, it only allows for 5, you can still add an ADU. Okay, this is huge. So, because in the past, cities would say, hey, you can't be more non-conforming. You're non-conforming now. We won't let you do this. Well, the ADU law says zoning overlay, you get to do it. All right, building code violations. So if you have an illegal unit and DBI in San Francisco, code enforcement comes out and says, illegal unit, notice of violation. You can go in as the owner and say, hey, will you hold this off for 5 years? And Phil, this really gets down, we've seen a lot of different illegal units. Maybe you can explain this a little bit more.
So what they're talking about there is specifically for non-life safety issues. So, I mean, if they walk in and there's wires hanging out, sparking and stuff like that, that's not the sort of thing that a building owner is going to get a deferment for. Things that they're going to be able to work with is maybe ceiling height, maybe, again, it's going to really depend on the jurisdiction on what they're going to consider to be life safety. Are they going to consider firewalls? It's possible. Are they going to consider plumbing? Yeah, very likely. So, most of the habitability issues are really going to need to be solved. And there might be some other issues that could be held off, but it's really going to be up to the jurisdiction on what they're going to consider life safety and what isn't.
So Phil, if I built out my basement and I made an ADU, I hired a legitimate contractor. They did a great job. They followed all the building codes, but I just said, I don't really want to pull a permit. This is what this would apply to. That it's probably up to building code, but you didn't get all the paperwork correct on it.
Yes.
It's not some, crazy unit that has a, 6.5 foot ceiling height and it gets damp on the walls every time it rains type of thing.
Right. Yeah. You definitely, it would be bad for a landlord to rent that sort of thing in.
Yeah. And let me just put this out here. We'll talk a little more. If you have an illegal unit and you know it, don't rent it. There are so many issues around it. We represent people in court that get sued for constructive eviction, warranty of habitability, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, minimum unit size, and actually I have the wrong one up here. It's, we changed this, I apologize. It's 220 square feet, it's not 150. So, sorry, my screen's wrong. I fixed it, I grabbed my old slide. So you can have a unit down to 220 square feet, and that's the smallest you can have is an efficiency unit. And Phil, this is driven by the building code. I know we had a long conversation about this. Maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, the building code says that you need to have a minimum size room in your ADU of 120 square feet. So I'm not sure where the 150 square foot came from, but yeah, the building code is very specific on an efficiency unit. And an efficiency unit is a unit that has living space, it has kitchen space, it has a bathroom space where you can wash and use the toilet and all of those things. It's everything that a person needs to live is an efficiency dwelling unit. And 220 square feet is the minimum that they will allow. Bigger is okay.
All right, great. So the second item here is parking. This is a huge issue. If you're within a half mile of a bus stop, you don't need parking. So you can turn that have an ADU, you don't need extra parking. This is a huge thing. If you're in a historic district, you don't need parking. This is a huge impediment for people adding units because the city says if you build a regular apartment unit, you need like 1-to-1 parking, or some cities are getting down to half a space per unit. This has been a huge issue. The third thing is fire sprinklers. If the primary dwelling unit doesn't need fire sprinklers, the ADU does not need fire sprinklers. If you build a brand new unit, you're going to have fire sprinklers. Now, there is one caveat. If you have a really long lot, like a 250 square deep lot, if you're past 150 feet deep, you're going to need to sprinkler that because a fire truck needs to come to the curb, unload all their hoses, and they need to put out the fire. If you're past 150 feet, then that's going to be a problem. So they can impose some reasonable fire stuff. But generally, for most of us in an urban environment, our lot is not 150 feet deep. You don't need fire sprinklers. All right, HOAs, our favorite, right? I have a rule about HOAs. They have 2 speeds, slow and super slow. That's how HOAs operate in the world. I'm sure many of you have HOAs, but that's generally how they. So anyway, if you have a house that's sitting in HOA and the CC&R says no secondary units, no ADUs, this overrides your CC&Rs. They can say we can have an architectural committee, but they can't make the hurdle so high you can't get over it. Okay, they can't unreasonably restrict ADUs. So if you have a house sitting in a HOA, you can do it. You could potentially have an ADU in a condo building or in a condo thing, but all the owners are going to have to agree. We actually worked on that in the city of Oakland. We had a small 2-unit condo project, and there was a basement, and it was on the city's position. It's multifamily. As long as all the owners agree, we'll let you have that ADU. Now, the ADU is always going to be attached to 1 unit, so it's going to be sold like a pod. All right, so we're going to skip this section. We're following a couple local jurisdiction. Check with your local jurisdiction. Email them. A lot of them have on the building department will have, and planning department will have updates. Call your local planning people and talk to them. Ask them if they have a local ordinance. If you're a MoDOT county and they don't have a local ordinance, you're just going to follow state law. All right, building considerations. We talked about lot coverage ratios. So if we're in the city, I'll just pick on another city. City of Alameda has a 40% lot coverage ratio. So they're saying, hey, your house is at 40% now. You can't have an ADU. State law says you get an ADU. Now they can restrict it down to 1,000 square feet, but the city can't say, hey, you're at the minimum lot coverage ratio now, so therefore no, they can't do that. Setbacks, 4 feet. Height, cities must allow 16 feet. Parking, obviously you're within a half mile of bus stop. There's some market considerations and some rent and eviction control issues as well. All right, converting existing space. Phil, this is kind of where it gets sticky. This is actually an ADU I did in the city of Richmond, and we had to fireproof the ceiling, add sound, separation, put walls in, and so look at ingress, egress. Phil, this is your area of expertise, so why don't you talk about some of the issues here?
So yeah, especially when you're doing something in a basement like this, ceiling height is key. Now, if you look at the photo here, you can see that those beams are coming down. Now, if those beams are fairly dispersed like these are here, they can actually be below the 7'6", but you have to be careful about that. Other things that we run into in basements is egress windows. You need to be able to escape from the bedroom, and so you need to have an openable window, and it has to meet certain specific size requirements on width and height, and it has to be a minimum openable space of 5.7 square feet. And so that can really be a problem in some of these places. Now, if you've got an ADU that is just one room, let's say that you were looking at this picture here and the bedroom is, maybe we're sitting on the bed taking this picture. So any of the windows in that room would be fine. However, if you've got a separate bedroom, then that separate bedroom window needs to be that minimum size of a window. Other things that you need to consider, you do need to upgrade the fireproofing between the 2 buildings. And more often than that, that's primarily just adding some sheetrock and maybe some soundproofing, which could be some insulation, hat channel. There's various different designs that you can do to stop the noise from going between the units, which you would appreciate, especially if you've got a neighbor with children.
I was asked, Phil, one time that if the basement window is high, but then can they just add a ladder so that it's easier to climb up to the window to escape?
That is a really good question, and that is going to be a local jurisdiction call. Normally, they've got minimums of 42 to 45 inches so that anybody can get to that window. So that's a good question for your building inspector. They might buy that. I don't have real high hopes for you on that one, though.
Bill, I actually did that in a basement that we converted to habitable space on a rehab project. And we went through the materials and methods change of the building code, and we built stairs up to the window. So it looked like little stairs going up to the windows, and that allowed for the ingress egress. But that was with the building official signing off on it. That's what we did on that one. So
yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a local jurisdiction, depending on how persnickety the building official is. Hey, go
Those
ahead, Phil.
questions to ask when you're in the planning stages, to include that in your plan so that the building inspection department understands what they're getting themselves into, so that they have so everybody has an option to have an opinion about it before you move too far.
Okay. Phil, just to give you on this, this was a tongue and groove ceiling on this, and we did the hat channel, and we did the 5/8 Type-X sheetrock. And then on the beams, we didn't want to sheetrock these in, so we used the intimescent fire paint on this to add this like sheetrock. But that was an interesting experience. You have to get it third-party inspected, and that costs more than the paint and the installation. So anyway, Phil, anything else that we should think about?
This is a pretty good list of things here. I noticed that there's a question here that's asking about City of Oakland changing their height. Now, in single family residential, the City of Oakland did lower the ceiling height to 7 feet, but that's single family and duplex, 1 and 2 family buildings. We're not talking about multiple buildings here. So anything beyond a duplex, the 7-foot ceiling height is not going to be okay.
And then the other thing, San Francisco, give you an example. The jurisdiction in San Francisco is 7.5. They don't allow 7 for single family and duplexes. So that jurisdiction has a very hard rule about 7.5. The local jurisdiction that is in Oakland has 2 different sizes. So your jurisdiction may have different sizes depending if you're under the residential code or the building code. So like I said, there's a lot of gray area about jurisdiction here. So.
Well, there are quite a few questions on our chat and also Q&A box. Can they start asking some questions here?
Sure, let's go through the thing, and I want to get your perspective on this, but I want to cover some rent and eviction control issues real quick, and then we'll keep moving, and then I want to get to Q&A because I know we're on a timeline. Okay, so here's one of the challenges with accessory dwelling units. So if you're in a jurisdiction that has just cause for eviction and rent control, so see if you have rent control and you say, hey, I'm in a single family home and I'm exempt, the definition is it's separately alienable. That's the technical legal definition. That means one house and one lot. When you build an ADU, you lose that, you're no longer separately alienable. So it's completely possible that the new ADU is exempt, but if you move into the new ADU, your house could be covered. This is a kind of a crazy definition area. So I just wanted to point out, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but if you thought you were exempt because you're a single family home, you now ADU, the answer is not necessarily. All right. I want to talk about legalizing illegal space. What's an illegal space? If you don't have a certificate of occupancy or approved permits saying that that's a separate unit, it's illegal. And people go, well, we built it to code. Well, no. You got to build it to code and have all the right paperwork. If you have an existing tenant, a lot of the phone calls we're getting is, hey, I have this illegal unit. And my first question is it occupied? A lot of cities, if you have to move the tenant out to legalize it, you're gonna have to pay relocation fees. Every jurisdiction is a little bit different. Have your lawyer help you with this. We do not help people with move outs because our E&O won't pay for that. So you're gonna need to hire an attorney. If you have an illegal unit and it's currently occupied, you're going to have to deal with that tenant in possession, and you're going to have to follow the local law and the state law. All right, so this is right out of the California Building Code, right out of the California Residential Code. If you change the existing use of the property, you're going to have to get a certificate of occupancy. This is, or in lack of a certificate of occupancy, show that the building, the proper permits were pulled and finalized. Okay, we won't get into amnesty issues, that's the whole thing. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac issues, 1 to 4 units, residential loans. If you are getting a Fannie Mac, Freddie Mac, FHA loan, they won't count the income of the ADU, which is really negative. If you're on a 5+ unit building, the lenders don't care. It seems like they'll count the income. So that's an issue for people going out and buying 1 to 4 unit buildings and adding ADUs. Okay, so risk and opportunities. Difficult to finance, you're sharing a lot. There's some crazy things about rent control, opportunities, add rental income, increasing property value, increasing the housing supply. And a lot of people are building ADUs, put grandma back there. I totally get it, it makes sense. So at this point, what I'll just say, what we can do and help, We do zoning research, the building permit history. Phil does all of our site inspections. We do a written report, and we have an architect. So basically, we can help you take it from concept to approved plans. So that's what we do. Helen, I know you're out with your clients talking about ADUs. What are you hearing, and what are the comments you're hearing from your clients?
I mean, so sometimes we would see homes with a ADU already, just like what you were saying, it's illegal. And then their questions like, okay, what is the process going to be like to legalize this? And do I have to take out everything for the inspector to come in to make sure that it is built up to code? How much is it going to cost?
Phil, you want to, we talk with clients like this all the time. You want to interject here?
Well, the biggest problem is starting off is people say, oh, it's up to code. Now, as a building inspector for 20 years, I can tell you that understanding what up to code is a profession. You have to do it professionally. You are constantly updating. Codes change every 3 years. And you have to, I mean, I studied and got a degree in college on building codes just so that I could start to keep up. There is a lot of codes that unfortunately, even the contractors who were doing it, electrical contractors, don't necessarily know all the rules on electrical. And a homeowner to state that they know what the code is just ludicrous. So unfortunately, we've got a lot of people who think that they're doing things right, but they just don't have the background. So that's a big problem. So a building inspector coming in, looking at a unit, they're going to start looking at the workmanship. They're going to look at things like plug placement, switch placement, and things like that. They're going to probably open up electrical panels, open up devices and stuff. And from just those few things, you can get a pretty good idea of how good of a concept these people have of code. And unfortunately, many times, because they don't, you do end up having to go back to studs to, move the tenant out, tear everything out, redo it, and then do it with all the inspections that are required. So it is entirely up to the jurisdiction on how they want to treat that. And it could be also just up to the individual inspector, depending on what they see and what their comfort level is with what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And what other questions are you hearing from your clients, Helen?
People are concerned about making sure that that they're putting people into a safe place, and that's a trick too, because there's so many easy things that you can do that could potentially turn your place into a death trap. Simple things like putting the wrong sort of deadbolt on it, to venting of gas appliances, lack of smoke alarms, lack of CO alarms. We've actually seen a couple people die because of carbon monoxide poisoning, and so that's a real issue that people need to be very cognizant about. And landlords who are renting out an illegal unit are just setting themselves up for a bad fall if that tenant decides to become litigious.
Yeah.
So
well,
Helen,
if you don't mind, I want to. Oh, sorry. I want to say.
Yeah, I wanted to get your experience because I know you're out selling multifamily apartments and other residential projects, properties. So I wanted to get kind of your feedback and some of the things that you're seeing and advising how you're advising some of your clients.
Yeah, a lot of our clients are actually really interested in building ADU for some additional income. And also, I think right now, especially because of the shelter in place, more and more people are talking about, like, I also want additional space for me to use as an office. But obviously, they would like to just build an ADU so they can use, it has a kitchen and then a bathroom, and also a use for an office. In city of San Jose, a few years ago, they had changed their code. Before it was like you have to be 8,000 square feet lot minimum in order to build an ADU. Now it's only 5,500 square feet. So they have relaxed a lot of these laws so that more people can build ADU, and which I find it very encouraging. And also they had reduced a lot of fees in terms of on the city level to allow people to build those. And David Zhang actually asked this one question I thought is other people had asked too, is like, what do you think of using prefab or modular home as ADU? Do you just dropping into the yard?
Yeah, so there's a lot of that out there. So I think one of the things that if you get so with the prefab, they can get it like FHA approved. They can get it they can go to the state architect and get it pre-approved. And so there's no inspection. The inspection actually happens at the factory, and it doesn't get inspected on site. But one of the things that you have to do is you have to make sure you're meeting the local jurisdiction and the state law. And then you have to have the right foundation. So you're still going to hire a local contractor to construct your foundation, and that all has to be inspected. And then if they come in, so let's say that you're in San Jose, you pull a permit, you get your you got to follow state and local codes about where to sit at, like 4-foot setback, height restrictions, and then you're still going to have to do a foundation work. And so if you're in a flat lot, good soil, it's going to be one thing. If you're on a hillside with sandy soil, you might be driving pylons, putting piers down. And so that foundation is going to have to be engineered. So there's still local things that are going to happen and site-specific things that are going to happen. But yeah, the contractor should be able to put that in and then crane it onto the site. The challenge, I think, with prefab stuff is, do you really want to crane it over your existing dwelling? That might be a little bit of a challenge. And Phil, maybe you can talk to the electrical and plumbing aspects of that prefab.
Yeah, so in addition to that foundation, you're also going to have a sewage connection. And so those could be pricey. Many times when you've got a detached, sometimes people are going to go in and connect to their existing sewer lateral, but many times they're going to run a new sewer lateral all the way into the street. As far as water service comes in, yes, you can tie into the existing, but again, sometimes a landlord would prefer to have their client pay for water. Same thing with electrical. When you start, when people have free electrical, all of a sudden they lose the ability to turn lights off and turn heaters off, and it can be very expensive. So in the short term, it's more expensive to install a metered electrical service, but in the long term, it's going to really pay off. So when you've got some older homes, you might be talking about substantial upgrades to the electrical, substantial upgrades to the water and the sewer too. So those are all things that need to be considered before you start thinking about dropping something in the yard. Now,
yeah, so all systems may have to be updated, like electrical. So if you have an old house with a 60 amp panel and you throw a big 80 back there, you might need a 200 amp service or something like that in order to, or two 100 amp services. So that all has to get calculated, and that's something that Phil does for our clients. So Helen, I wanted to put up here for your lawyer, this is a site for you. You need to text MCLE to this number here, and we'll get you credit. So,
that's right. If any lawyers here, definitely should jot down this information so you can get your credit.
All right. Do we have other questions, Helen?
Yes. So there's an anonymous attendee saying that I want to expand my current 2-bedroom house to a 4-bedroom. Does it consider as attached ADU or consider as expansion?
Well, ADU would be a separate entrance, and ADU is really a separate dwelling. So if you're adding on because you want to add a master suite and another bedroom, that's really an extension of the house, unless you're trying to make that extension a separate dwelling. So the issue is separate dwelling.
Yeah, I think we see some people, they would add like 2 more bedrooms and then adding a door in between that side of the house with the main house, and then basically convert that into an ADU. So, and
you could do that. You can do that, but it would still have its own bathing facility, its own kitchen, but maybe we put grandma back there and there's a door from, our house, her space, but she has her own thing going on. Yeah. That's entirely possible.
There's also another question. Well, I think Steve, you've been mentioning this. Is this depends on which city you're in, or it's basically the same in every city? So obviously there's a state law, but then again, there's local jurisdiction as well. So you have to check with your own city.
Right. And the other thing that we're seeing is your building official may take certain, interpretations. They tend to take a more conservative interpretation. I know we're fighting with a couple jurisdictions about their interpretation of the law. So yeah, the local jurisdiction, their interpretation, there's going to be some gray area there.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much does it cost, paperwork, et cetera, ballpark, to convert an existing in-law unit in San Francisco in the back part of a garage into a legal rentable unit? Currently, no separate water meter, et cetera.
All right, I'm going to refer you to my next screen. Go to my website, Edrington Associate, and book appointment. And we can, and I think we need to have a one-off conversation about that. It's too general.
And what are the tax implications to consider when deciding whether or not one should try to legalize an existing in-law unit that's currently just being used for storage to make it rentable? And are there implications on whether eventually the owner can ask a tenant to move out, to move back into the main dwelling unit?
Okay, you have a couple of questions there. When you convert that garage or basement to a lawful unit, every time you pull a permit in a jurisdiction, that local jurisdiction is going to send that information to your county assessor. That's how it works. So if I go into, San Jose, city of San Jose, pull a permit, they're going to send it to the county assessor, and it may trigger an increase based on the assessment rules. So what I suggest that you do, if you have a concern about property tax, call the county assessor, ask for the appraiser and say, hey, I'm thinking about building an ADU or converting. How will you reassess it? Talk to them. They can help you. That's their thing. We do help our clients if they get in a jam, but generally they can just pick up the phone and call them like we would. And the second question is, can you reread about the tenancy?
Are there implications whether eventually the owner can ask a tenant to move out, to move back into the main dwelling unit?
Okay, tenancy issues are really difficult situations. If you're going to ask a tenant to move even temporarily, or you're going to buy them out, there's a lot of buyout rules. There's a lot about relocation rules. Contact a competent lawyer, somebody that specializes in landlord tenant. Pick up the phone, call them, pay them for their time. Believe me, it's a lot cheaper. Don't be a cowboy and do it on your own. There's just too many rules around it. We go to court as expert witnesses because landlords wrongfully evicted their tenant. They had an illegal unit. They sued them they moved out, claimed constructive eviction, all sorts of things. Landlords are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. Their carriers are paying hundreds of thousands. Don't be one of those people. Be smart, pick up the phone, call your lawyer. This is what I want to do. Yeah. And if you don't know a lawyer, who do I call? Go to my website under my resource page. I have a list of lawyers that you can download, and they're all competent and know what they're doing.
Awesome. Great. Will you be able to share this PDF?
Email me info@Edrington and Associates, and then we'll share something with you.
Great. And Maya asks, what if your existing structure is a garage on the property line, which is in Oakland, and you want to build your ADU above the garage so you don't lose your garages? Do the new ADU rules apply, allowing to build up for an ADU and still have the 16 feet height limit?
This is an Oakland question?
Yeah.
Well, actually, Phil and I are working on this with the city about redoing their ADU law. So one of the things that we're putting in that law is that you can put that unit over a garage and still go up and still be at the 0 lot line. Currently, the state says 16, the city must allow 16 feet. Phil, I don't know if you can add on to the existing garage and stay under how it could be interpreted that new structure over the garage, unless the city allows for it, has to be set back 4 feet. You want to comment on that? We went around and around.
Yeah, that's exactly my understanding as well, is that yes, you can build up on top, but you will need to take that portion of the structure and set it back 4 feet. Now, can you get a zoning to change that? Yes, you can definitely go in and try to get a zoning exemption from that.
We're trying to write in the ordinance that it's just automatic, that if you decide that you have a 1-car, 10-foot high garage and you want to rebuild it and put an ADU and go up 20 feet, that they're just going to automatically give it to you. So, and you don't have to go through a zoning or conditional use permit. That we're trying to streamline it for the city of Oakland. So we think that will happen in a couple months. So.
Great. All right, so another question is, I have a legal basement with a kitchen except a stove. After installing a stove, do I only need to get a certificate of occupancy, and how much do they run?
So they have what do they have? A legal
basement.
A legal basement. Okay. So let's talk about habitable spaces versus uninhabitable spaces. You can have a legal garage, you can have a legal basement. And what are those categories? U occupancies, Phil?
Yes.
So you have a U occupancy. It's legal. It's a U occupancy. As soon as you do a change of use, you got to come up to either an R2 or R3 occupancies and all the things that go around that in the building code. So no, you can't just add a kitchen to a basement and call it a day. No, you have to actually meet the current building code for that occupancy.
Now, if that is a habitable space, if it was included as part of the original home, then yes, you can convert it to a junior ADU, and that's exactly what the junior ADU is made for. Is
Right.
that's where you've got legal habitable space, and you're going to convert a portion of that in your home to its own junior ADU. Then yes, that's exactly what this law was designed to do.
For that piece, but Phil, you're still going to have to meet the building code. So,
Oh no, absolutely, you definitely are, for sure.
okay, so I want to make a distinction because people are getting confused here. I can convert that existing habitable space in my single family home and make it a junior ADU. I can't do that in multifamily. What they don't want to happen. Let's say I have a 4-bedroom, 2-bath apartment unit. They don't want landlords splitting up that 4-bedroom, 2-bath and have 2 units. So you can convert existing habitable space in a house. You can't convert existing habitable space in an apartment building to an ADU. So it's all just conversion of basements, garages, and things like that. So that's been those questions have come up, and we've had to answer those. They don't want people splitting units and having little tiny units.
Yeah, definitely there are some discussion about that. It's just splitting a big apartment unit into 2 units. So
Right.
this is great clarification. Thank you so much. And then lastly, David has another question. What about turning a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house to 3 separate studios, 1-bath units with their own kitchen? Can I still add ADU in backyard? Does it classify now as 4 units or 2?
Okay, so this is a single family home?
Yeah, it sounds like this is a single family house.
Yeah, you get to convert one space to an ADU, and you can build one ground up new space as an ADU. So you can't convert 2 existing spaces to ADUs. And that's a great question. There's a new law. There was just an appellate decision in Owens versus the city of Oakland, and I'll give you the example. Owens has a 4-bedroom house. He lives in the house, and he rented out his 3 other bedrooms to separate people on separate rental agreements. His tenant took him to the rent board and says, hey, you had a decrease in housing services. The rent board says, you're not a single family home. You're operating as a multi-unit building.
Mm.
It got appealed. They sued out of the rent board, went to County of Alameda Superior Court, went on the Court of Appeals. Landlord lost. They told landlord, you're not operating as a single family home. You're operating as an apartment building. So therefore the rent control applies. So I would just, if you're going to start cutting up your single family dwelling and making a rooming house, 1, it's probably against the zoning code, and 2, you're going to have some rent control implications too. So if the city catches you cutting up your building as a rooming house and you don't have proper permits, they will shut you down.
Yeah, I agree. And that there are some other ones will be like renting every single room out or somehow adding more bedrooms in a house. The same thing that will apply to the rent law as well.
Well, and also code enforcement came out and said, you have a 3-bedroom house and you're on paper it's 3 bedrooms, but in practical experience it's a 9-bedroom. So I've seen those, and the city will shut you down.
Yep, exactly. Well, I thank you so much for all this information. It's been so wonderful, and you guys provided such great information. We are 3:05 right now. We have 5 minutes behind, but I want to again say thank you. But as a parting message, I want to share this slide with you guys. It says, be willing to be a beginner every single morning. This is truly, I think, we all, no matter how many years of experience we are in our industry, in our profession, we are continuing learning. And don't be afraid to ask questions. I really appreciate all of you to be on our call today. And again, this is, unfortunately today, Mark, he is an architect. He was not able to make it.
Well, so,
yeah. Yep, and he's not feeling well today. But if you guys have any questions regarding ADU, feel free to contact Steve directly. Here's Steve's email address, and Phil, he works with Steve. So thank you. And then our next webinar is going to be on June 24th, again from 2 to 3 p.m. So hopefully I will see you guys then. Thank you so much.
Hey, Helen, thanks for having us. It was fun.
Oh, it was fun. Thank you. You always provide such great information. Truly appreciate it.
All right, glad to be here.
Okay, thank you so much, Phil.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.